Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're still watching The Breakfast Show live on Nile TV International. And on this segment of the show, we're going to be talking about the visit of the Chief Executive of the World Bank, Kristalina Georgieva, and her meeting with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. In light of this, we will be talking about the importance of the role of international organizations in supporting Egypt's economy and also its role in the world economy. We will be talking about the significance of the meeting and the main topics discussed with our guest here at the studio, Dr. Youmn Hamaki, Professor of Economics. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Youmn.
Good morning, Doctor. If I talked about Egypt on the international level, definitely our relation with the World Bank is an integral part from talking about the relation or the international relation when it comes to Egypt. In addition, of course, that talking about the sustainable development and the economic reform program, now it is a role model in the world and the fast economic growth as well as the fastest in the region. What is your impact on all this?
I think, Egypt should rely to international organizations such as World Bank and the IMF. For the benefit of the Egyptian people and the Egyptian economy, and this actually has been done so far, which means that regarding the World Bank, we have a historical relation with the World Bank, taking into consideration, all activities of the World Bank in Egypt, starting from enhancing education and health services, as well as combating poverty. That the World Bank started in Egypt from the 1990s, collecting data about, poverty in Egypt and to how extent each geographic area suffering from poverty. And these statistics, Egypt referred to it significantly in order to enhance its economic policies and social policies towards combating poverty. Besides, we have other, programs referring to, like you mentioned, Nashwa's sustainable development, specifically in renewable energy. The IMF is supporting technically Egypt in, solar energy, to how extent, Egypt should apply and refer to renewable energy. What are the studies required? What technical assistance are needed in order to proceed in benefiting from renewable energy? The question mark is to how extent Egypt is benefiting from such support from international economic organizations. We have done a lot of researches regarding tracing the impact of these organizations. To a large extent, the results of these studies mention that, the policy that can be done by the country is the main key factor to specify to how extent a country can benefit from such organizations. For the case of Egypt, actually, we didn't succeed to benefit, rationally from such organizations, despite that, there were quite positive effect from their support in Egypt, but still a lot of policy recommendations are needed in order to rationalize, the benefit of these organizations. Like, for example, for renewable energy, when you have, as a country, a clear vision, like what we have nowadays. Nowadays, we have a clear vision towards how we can, proceed in renewable energy. From here it comes, when a country can have a clear vision, an action plan, you can benefit better from these organizations. And, there is a collaboration between IMF and the World Bank, and this has been done after criticizing to a large extent the role of these international organizations. Nowadays, they are trying to improve their performance in developing countries, and I believe that Egypt has finished a successful economic reform by monitored by the IMF. From here it comes that we need as Egypt to rationalize benefiting, like a very important, decisions that has been taken by policymakers in Egypt, that for the coming period we finish $12 billion facilities, extended facilities from the IMF for achieving economic reform. For the coming period, we are about to negotiate about, we don't want money, but we want technical assistance, which means that we have experts from the IMF that came periodically to revise our economic policies, and to, these are quite good experts to discuss with our experts what can be done for the benefit of the economy. So we need this type of technical assistance. And when the IMF and these international organizations are delivering, reports mentioning that the Egyptian economy is doing well, this can be regarded as very important, a step towards attracting foreign direct investment.
Mm-hmm. Right, Dr. Youmn, the meeting with Kristalina Georgieva with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi was also attended by Governor of the Central Bank, Tariq Amer, and the Minister of International Cooperation, Dr. Sahar Nasr. How do you see the significance of this meeting and the main topics discussed, and specifically with regards to Egypt's future investments?
Yes, this is quite important. Why? Because, as you mentioned, we have a governor of the central bank who is mainly responsible for the monetary policy, as well as Dr. Sahar Nasr. She is responsible for economic cooperation and investments. The crux for Egypt nowadays is how to attract investments. Why? Because nowadays we have spent a lot of money for infrastructure, for mega projects, for enlarging the choices of investment all over Egypt. We used to live on just 6% of the surface of Egypt. Nowadays we are trying to extend this. When you extend, the areas, you are extending your choices and your possibilities for investment. For example, Egypt hasn't exploited yet its mineral resources, despite the importance of mineral resources. Why? Mineral resources can, can support a lot our movement towards having the industrial sector as engine of growth. Nowadays, when you analyze the situation of investment in Egypt, you have 2 points, 2 important points to be mentioned. The first point is that investment still dominated by the public sector, which means that a large percentage of investment is public investment. We need to transfer this percentage into the dominance of the private sector. So this is one point which is quite important. The second point, still, the engine of growth for Egypt is 2 main sectors for this year. The gas sector, and the construction. We need to change it into the industrial sector should be the engine of growth, supported by the agriculture sector. So these changes need and require a lot of efforts to be done in order to attract investment. What we need for the coming period is attracting foreign direct investment, not just mentioning foreign direct investment, any multinationals or foreign investors to come, but we need to select and to create the mutual benefit between these companies and our economy. How? Because nowadays when you try to enhance the role of the manufacture sector and increase the value added in this sector, you need to transfer technology. And this is the role of the foreign direct investment. So we need to attract foreign direct investments that may help us to transfer technology, to upgrade skills, to help us to penetrate international markets, because we need to enhance the role of exports. Nowadays, when you refer, one of the challenge for the Egyptian economy is a deficit in the balance of trade. Why? Because we're still importing double, one or three double what we are exporting. Our export is quite minimal compared to our capabilities. We have a lot of industries nowadays that we can have a comparative advantage. We should support these industries for exportation. Our export is only $25 billion. The government nowadays is having a plan in order to increase this percentage to reach within two years $55 billion. So in order to achieve this goal, we need to activate our productive capabilities in Egypt, and to improve the capabilities of youth to share and participate, either by upgrading their skills to join these industries or by self-employment. So all these activities, are quite required in Egypt in order to attract foreign direct investment. And this can explain why, despite all efforts that have been exerted to encourage foreign direct investment, still, the percentage of foreign direct investment is still low compared to the potentialities in Egypt to have very profitable project.
Mm-hmm. Doctor, I want also to move on to talk about the African continent as well.
Yes.
Because Egypt achieved a lot when it comes to electricity, transportation, education, health, in addition, of course, to renewable energy, as we mentioned right now. So in addition, of course, to our international relation now, especially we have just finished with the TCAT 7, also there was the G7, the last visit to Kuwait. So if I talked about all this and how also we can upgrade and transfer technology and take with us parallelly the African countries with us, so as we have all to move parallel to each other.
Yes, I agree with you, Nashwa. Why? Because, we have, common destiny with African continent. We have, the same challenges. Still, we have a large percentage of poverty, of unemployment. We didn't exploit our resources, despite that Egypt has done a lot for that compared to the African countries, but still, we have the same challenges. And, this year that Egypt took the presidency of the African Union, this year has witnessed, extensive activities in order to enhance our relation and to mainstream, our economic policies with being integrated into African countries. You know that we have nowadays a free trade area, including 55 African countries. It needs a lot of work. Why? Because when you have a free trade area, it's not just by signing the agreement and taking the approval of the parliament about the implementation of this agreement, but it needs a lot of work on several levels. On the government level, you need to harmonize your policies. Why? Because you cannot have a free trade area without harmonizing policies among the countries involved. So this is very important, and this actually can be regarded as the main obstacle for the Arab economic integration. We didn't achieve successful result from it. So we have to study, the lessons learned from, this experience by benefiting from, number one, harmonizing economic policies, social policies as well. Besides, we have on the private sector level, we have to enhance BB according to contemplating comparative advantage. This is another obstacle. Why? Because it needs a direction from experts and the government. Why? Because you know, you cannot only rely on the private sector. You should, according to successful experience, you should clarify to investors what are the potentialities according to studies. And we have a lot of studies actually, but we cannot benefit from it. So what we have to do is to make a gathering and to discuss what are the opportunities of having mutual investment based on mutual benefit among businessmen and women for Africa. And you can see, Nashwa, that for the last period, we can witness several events in order to discuss, you know, this matter. And this is a good point to be done, but it needs to be monitored in order to be activated and to have the impact of it on what is the impact. When you refer to intra-trade, intra-investment, you can witness, these are indicators. You should follow indicators to figure out to how extent you are successful in your policies or no.
Right. Dr. Youmn, you mentioned a very important point, which is exportation. The field of exportation in Egypt, how can we enhance this field? What fields of exports should we be focusing on to boost in order to enhance our economy?
Any countries that had passed the experience of what we can call export-led growth, which means that the exportation should be, you know, the key factor affecting all economic, social policies. Such, we have successful experience like China, South Korea, and so on. These countries, they succeeded by several elements that, you know, helps them to achieve such success. First of all, number one is to have a vision. The vision is to specify which product you can compete with it internationally. So you have to specify the products that you have a comparative advantage. For the case of Egypt, we have millions of studies to specify that. And we kept saying for the last 10 and 20 years that we have ready-made clothes, we have food industry, we have, you know, furniture, we have a comparative advantage in furniture, in leather product. All this, we can start with it and boost it, you know, in order to increase our share in the international market. Despite that, the statistics mention that our export of ready-made clothes had decreased for the last months. Our export of furniture had decreased too for the last months. What is the significance of that? The significance of that is you cannot, as government and social, you know, like businessmen and what we can call social society, you cannot just put and set action plans in rooms. You have to go to the industries that are responsible for this production. You have to go, you have to ask them what are their problems. You have to specify these problems and try to help them solve these problems. For example, the industry, the industrial sector, the last 2 years witnessed severe challenges by flotation, number one. They are relying on import, mainly 35% of that product coming from importation. So when you have the flotation, cost of production has increased substantially. You have increased this period the prices of gas, of water, you know, of electricity. From here it comes that all, you know, cost of production had increased. And this affected seriously their competitiveness and capability to compete. So you have to go to the industry and not just by strengthening large industries, because, you know, even if you tried to support large industries, and it's right that the large industries can export better. Why? Because they have technology, they have the capability to penetrate market and to know the markets and so on. But if you rely only on large investors, you cannot achieve a significant percentage of export. Like for the case of China, 60% of their export is from small industries. The same for Egypt. we are 6% only. Imagine the difference. This is explaining to you that you are not planning right. When you plan right for exportation, it's not just by specifying how to subsidize export. This is what the government is concentrating on. We need to support industries for exportation. We are going to give subsidies. This is quite important. Subsidies witnessed a significant change to be divided into three types. First, monetary subsidy, and the second is by deducing commitment, and the third one is by supporting them with technical assistance. So this is good, it's not bad, but it's not the only factor. The most important factor in order to enhance export is to go to investors, to the manufacturers themselves, and to study their problems and to try to support them to penetrate markets. And as our studies as economists, field studies with small business, we can, mention strongly that we have a lot of capabilities in different industries in no time to support them for exportation. And this will make a difference for the Egyptian case.
If we are talking in general about the banking sector or banking system and how it achieved a lot in this respect, especially talking also about the procedures that were taken recently by the Central Bank of Egypt as well, well, definitely this also will affect production, increasing Egyptian products or production in general, supporting the Egyptian industry as well, and giving space for more investments, Egyptian investments to take place in Egypt, whether we're talking about the interest rates or the recent the price of the dollar, of course. Yes. These were must measures to improve the Egyptian economy, and definitely I believe that we are on the right track. Other than this, no one can
Cutting interest rate is a very important step that has been taken in order to enhance investment. Our banking sector is quite strong banking sector. We are exerting great effort towards improving their capabilities. Despite that, still we need a lot of efforts to be done to increase the capability of the banking sector for, supporting investment in Egypt and diversify these types of investment. And when we talk about the initiative of President Sisi of 200 billion Egyptian pound delivered by the banking sector with a very minimal interest rate 5%, we have nowadays the central bank is doing a lot of researches to monitor to have like a SWOT analysis about this initiative and how to, address if there are some obstacles preventing the initiative to achieve its goals. Still some bad exercises and misusing of this initiative that needs to be addressed properly. So a lot should be done regarding, and nowadays the performance of Egypt is much better. We are trying to do our best in order to rectify the errors that have been done in the past, and there were a lot of errors actually. So we have to proceed, inshallah.
I think also it's now we can see a real monitor to all measures and procedures taken.
Yes.
So at the end, Dr. Youmn Hamaki, Professor of Economics at Shams University, always a pleasure having you with us on this show. And right now, moving on to a quick break, then we'll be back with more on our breakfast.